Production is a place where if something can go wrong, it eventually will go wrong. Every software has some bugs. We try to our best to write best unit tests, integration tests, but still usually something sneaks in, unfortunately. Also, in production, servers can go down. We can have attacks. Someone tried to hack our API. There are some use cases that we just didn't think about, or someone manipulates the data in the database manually. And there are many tools that we can use to handle these bugs in production, right? There are logging tools, monitoring, tracing. And that's what usually happens, right? You either receive an alert that, the server blew up, or there is a number of errors is above the sky. Or you just, when nothing really important happened, you just go to the office the next day, you sit in the morning, and then you browse the error logs to see what just happened. And there's one tool that addresses the same issue, and that is Sentry. And Sentry is very special for me because I work with Sentry since July this year on the Java SDK, and we just released new version. So in this video, I would like to show you how to use Sentry, especially with Spring Boot, because I think we added some really nice features and the integration is just a breeze. So first of all, how Sentry is different from any type of logging aggregation tool. Why wouldn't you just go and browse the logs on your server with a terminal or something like that? So Sentry has a couple of really nice features. So first of all, every error that happened in the scope of HTTP request is decorated with a HTTP data, like HTTP headers, HTTP request parameters. Then another thing is that usually when the error happens, something happens before the error as well. Some not errors, but just some info type of information. So you can think about it in a way that when you log something with debug, with info, and then eventually an error happens, these logs that happened before can be super useful to analyze what actually and why did it happen. So with Sentry, all the info debug statements are attached to error event as breadcrumbs. So when you go to the UI, you click on the issue and then you immediately see, okay, this was an error, but this is what happened before. Another problem that I always had with a log aggregation platforms is that when something happens, especially on the high traffic system, the same error happens like hundreds of times. And then you have to go browse through the logs, grab them, remove them, extract them, just to see if maybe, except this one thing that happened 100 times, maybe there was also something else. So what Sentry does, that is aggregates. If the same error happened multiple times, you will see just a one entry of it in the UI, and then you will see that there are like 100 events related to this error. So as I mentioned before, we have just released Java SDK 3.0 for Sentry. And it comes with super nice enhancement, especially for Spring Boot, but also to logging framework like Logback. And in this video, I will show you how to configure Spring Boot with the new Sentry SDK and how does it look like. The thing is also that Sentry is open source. So even if you don't or you cannot pay for Sentry to use it as a service, you can still deploy it on your local, maybe not local, but maybe deploy it in production on Kubernetes or EC2 or whatever you prefer, and use everything that I'm discussing in this video with your application. But if you just want to try out Sentry, I recommend signing up with a developer account, which is free, and you can use it to store 5,000 errors per month. And this can be perfectly fine even for production type of applications. Okay, this intro took a little bit longer than I initially planned, but right now let's get to the setting app Spring Boot application with Sentry. So first of all, we gotta go to Sentry dashboard to create a new project. So I hit create project, I choose Java, and then I scroll to the bottom and put the project name. I will call it Spring Academy. Then we go to the IDE and we need to add a dependency to Sentry Spring Boot Starter. So I'm in the maven pom.xml, dependencies, I choose Sentry Spring Boot Starter, the group is io.sentry, and the version is 3.0. I will refresh the dependencies, and once the starter is loaded, we are able to configure Sentry through Spring Boot configuration properties. So I will now open application properties in a Spring Pet Clinic project, and we need to specify at least one property, which is sentry.dsn. The DSN is a URL that identifies a project. And to get it, we go back to the Sentry dashboard. We go to Settings, choose Projects, find the project we are interested in. In our case, it's Spring Academy, and then go to SDK Setup section where we will find client keys. So we copy this DSN value and put it to application.properties in the Sentry DSN property. There's one more thing that I would strongly advise to configure. It's a Sentry.inAppIncludes. And as the value, you put your packages. So not from the third-party classes, very likely, but from your source code. So in this case, in Spring Pet Clinic, it is going to be org.springframework.samples.petclinic. So now, when I run the application, Pet Clinic has a one special dedicated controller to simulate an error. It's called crash controller with the URL /oops. So I will now go to the browser, go to my localhost 8080/oops, and this under the hood triggered an error that is unhandled. Pet Clinic has only the error page configured for any kind of unhandled errors. And we see in the logs that there was a runtime exception thrown. So now when I go back to the Sentry dashboard and I go to projects, select the Spring Academy project, we will see that there is one issue, runtime exception, decorated with all the metadata that I mentioned before. So there is a browser, there is information about the URL, and then we also see the stack trace. But as you can see, the stack trace is different, like it's much shorter. Because we set up this in-app packages, it filters out everything that does not come from our package. But sometimes we may want to see deeper in a stack what has happened. So then we can switch it from the app only to full, and then we see like all the stack trace elements that we are used to from Java. There's also a row view where we can just, maybe you will find it easier to copy paste it when you want to send it, for example, on Slack or someone else. Every event sent to Sentry can be also attached with a user information, like a username, user ID, or user email address, but also even the IP address of a user. That's not something that everyone wants to do. So this is not turned on by default. But if you would like to turn it on, you have to set another property, sentry.sendDefaultPII, where PII stands for personal identifiable information. And when we set it to true, Sentry SDK takes the value from the principal object and sets it as a username. Also, it takes the IP address. If the request goes through the proxy, then it will take the IP address from the X forwarded for HTTP header. You may also provide more user information if you need to. Then you have to implement a user Sentry provider interface and just mark it as a component, and then implement the provide user method. So here you can set the email address or some other custom metadata. And then whenever there is an event that is going to be sent to Sentry, it will be decorated with this user information in addition to the IP address and the username that is taken from the HTTP request. Sentry SDK provides more hooks like that, when you can hook into the event processing pipeline and customize it in some way. One way to do it is to implement an event processor from Sentry SDK, which also has just one single method, process, where we can either remove some information from the event, change the information, add extra fields, or even drop the event if some condition is not met. So if you make this method return null, then the event will be not sent to Sentry at all. I believe that the Sentry and Spring integration really shines when you also add a Logback integration. Then every error log statement will be turned into a Sentry event, and it will also be decorated with the same HTTP parameters, with the same metadata that you have seen before. In addition to it, everything that was logged as an info or debug will be turned into breadcrumb. And it's very easy to do it because the only thing you have to do is to add a dependency to Sentry Logback. And the beauty of it is that I don't even need to configure the Sentry appender in a Logback XML file, because the Sentry Spring Boot starter will automatically detect that I have a Sentry Logback on my class path, but I have not registered a Sentry appender, so it will register it for me. I can opt out from it if I don't want this appender registered for whatever reason, just by setting Sentry logging enabled to false. Also, if you have your custom Logback XML file, it's enough just to declare your own Sentry appender if you would like to customize it in some other way. So now let me go back to the crash controller, and we will add here a logger. And before this exception is thrown, I will just log something with a info level, like I am about to trigger an exception. So now if we run the application and trigger this exception again, when I go to Sentry dashboard and go to the same issue, because this is exactly the same exception that was reported, so you will not see a new entry here, you will see that we have now much more breadcrumbs. So every log statement that was logged with info is added as a breadcrumb. So we see the startup logs from Spring Boot. We also see extra breadcrumb added just through the Sentry Spring integration, and our log that was added before the exception was thrown from the method. So last but not the least, Sentry has a concept of releases. If the Sentry SDK is able to provide an information about the release, where the release can be, for example, git commit ID, every event has a release name attached to it so that we can very quickly see if a certain release contained or introduced an error. With Spring Boot, it works in a way that you have to have a configured git commit ID plugin. So the standard way you can provide the git information to Spring Actuator, and there's also an equivalent for Gradle. So once you have this plugin configured, you don't have to do really anything more. This information about the git commit ID is automatically attached to events. So then you can verify it by just looking into issues, and then every issue on the right-hand side will have a release tag attached. And this will be it. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new and got a little bit excited about Sentry and Spring Boot integration. If you did, please hit the like button. It will help me to get this video out there. And if you have some issues or if you have some ideas for Sentry and Java integrations, please create an issue on GitHub. We have quite a lot of ideas, like for example, Spring Webflux integration. So we can't promise that everything will be implemented, but I will do my best to make this integration as good as possible. So, see you in the next video.